The case of Brandon Duran. Brandon Duran was born in 1980 in San Diego, California. His father was a motorcycle enthusiast and a former member of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, which the FBI recognizes as the second largest criminal organization in the world after the Hells Angels. When Brandon was about 10 years old, his parents divorced, yet they stayed on good terms and shared the responsibility of raising him. During his upbringing, Brandon developed a passion for motorcycles much like his father's. At 25, he owned a motorcycle that he had built himself and valued immensely. Brandon's life took a difficult turn in April 2005 when his father died suddenly. To cope with his deepening depression, Brandon felt the need for change. He set out on a new journey by riding his motorcycle to Las Vegas. After living in Las Vegas for about a year, he met Amber Andrews, a 24-year-old woman who helped him forget all his worries. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage just 2 months after meeting. Around this time, Amber was pregnant, and in December 2006, she gave birth to Brandon's son, Brando. The birth of their child became a crucial turning point in Brandon's life. He grew into a caring, responsible husband and father, putting his family above personal interests and seeking a well-paying job. In contrast, Amber's lifestyle remained unchanged. She continued to prioritize her social life, often attending biker events and parties, appearing indifferent to the presence of their child. Consequently, the relationship between Brandon and Amber deteriorated quickly, frequently resulting in heated quarrels. The collapse of their relationship ultimately ended in divorce 4 years after their wedding. Brandon was awarded full custody of their son, mainly because he could provide a stable home for both himself and Brando, something Amber was unable to offer. After their divorce was finalized in 2010, Amber moved back to her hometown of Meeker, Oklahoma, while Brandon returned to San Diego with their son. He felt content being back with his family. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Who assisted him in raising Brando? Over time, the emotional scars from his failed marriage started to heal, and Brandon once again became hopeful about the future. However, during the summer of 2012, he was surprised to find Amber standing at his doorstep. His ex-wife wanted to reconcile, pleading for another chance at their relationship. The emotions Brandon had worked hard to bury came flooding back. He trusted Amber's sincerity and decided to start anew. Their son Brando was about to begin kindergarten, and Amber suggested the three of them visit her parents in Oklahoma, who wished to see their grandson. Brandon agreed, and they began getting ready for the trip, planning to stay in Oklahoma for roughly a week. Just a few days before Brandon, Amber, and Brando were to return to San Diego, Van Emblome contacted the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Emblome reported that his friend had sought his help to dispose of a body, claiming it belonged to Brandon Duran. The person who requested Emblome's help was Justin Hammer, a 30-year-old from Garvin County. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation notified the local sheriff's office about a possible crime, prompting the sheriff and his deputy to visit Justin's farm. The police also reached out to Brandon's relatives in San Diego, who informed them that they had not heard from Brandon for several days. The police chose not to reveal details to Brandon's family until they confirmed the information given by Emblome. During questioning, Justin unexpectedly admitted to killing Brandon Duran. However, Justin insisted he acted in self-defense, portraying Brandon as an intimidating biker gang member who had threatened him. According to Justin, on August 7th, Brandon arrived at his house on his motorcycle, kicked the door open with his foot, entered, and began issuing threats. Justin claimed to have a close relationship with Amber, which appears to be the reason for Brandon's visit. He said Brandon ordered him to stay away from Amber, warning that if he refused, Brandon's biker club associates would ensure he disappeared forever. Brandon also allegedly threatened to harm Justin's relatives if he did not obey. In response to these threats, Justin claimed he grabbed a handgun nearby and fired. After Brandon died, Justin feared retaliation from the motorcycle club and chose not to contact law enforcement. Instead, he attempted to hide all traces of the event. Justin moved the body to the bathroom, where he used a saw to dismember it, then placed the remains in 5 paint buckets and sealed them with cement. However, because the buckets became extremely heavy once filled with cement, Justin was unable to lift them into his pickup truck alone. He sought help from his friend Emblem, who helped him but then immediately reported Justin to the police and left. Justin then drove to his farm and dumped the buckets into a small pond. After disposing of the body, Justin thoroughly cleaned the house and burned all the cleaning materials, gloves, and rags he had used. To get rid of Brandon's motorcycle, Justin gave it to a relative who unknowingly dismantled it for spare parts without realizing where it had come from. Police later arrived in Meeker to inform Amber of the devastating news after the 5 submerged buckets were recovered from the pond. She was shocked to learn of Brandon's death, even though they had been separated, as the couple had been planning to reconcile and resume life together. Amber explained that she had argued with Brandon the previous day because he discovered her relationship with Justin. After their argument, Brandon left on his motorcycle, declaring that he would personally confront her lover. This version of events initially appeared believable, but the case soon took a new turn. Criminologists examining Justin's home uncovered evidence that contradicted his story. Justin had first claimed Brandon kicked the door in, but investigators later found that the door had actually been kicked outward from the inside. Footprints on the door matched the soles of Justin's own sneakers, showing that he was the one who kicked it. Additional findings included a gun safe containing a list of supplies needed to dispose of a body, along with a pistol and a shotgun. This discovery implied that the crime may have been planned in advance rather than committed impulsively. Furthermore, a doghouse recovered from the pond was filled with cement and contained debris that did not belong to the 5 buckets previously found. Justin was charged with first-degree murder based on the evidence gathered. A forensic pathologist examined 25 pieces of Brandon's remains and concluded that he had been shot 4 times in the head. The autopsy showed that Brandon was shot 3 times with a pistol and once with a shotgun, with the shotgun being the final shot. According to the expert, the shotgun wound occurred after Brandon was already dead and lying on the floor. However, this contradicted Justin's statement, in which he claimed he had fired only 1 shotgun blast. Police found his account suspicious because he did not explain why he would use a shotgun after firing 3 pistol shots, especially when Brandon was already deceased. This contradiction raised numerous questions and suggested that another individual might have been involved. Brandon's mother, Cindy, was devastated when police informed her of her son's death. After calming herself, Cindy clarified that Brandon had never been part of the Bandito Motorcycle Club. She attributed his interest in motorcycles to his father, who had passed down the hobby. Yet Cindy's account revealed an important detail. Brandon's motorcycle had broken down before the trip to Oklahoma, so he placed it in the bed of his pickup truck, intending to repair it upon arriving there. Cindy also said that her son disliked confrontation and believed that his ex-wife, Amber, was the source of his troubles. Amber's infidelity had damaged their relationship from the very beginning, and even after the birth of their son, she continued her unfaithful behavior. Whenever Brandon expressed disagreement, Amber would react aggressively and initiate fights. This ultimately led to their divorce, after which Brandon received full custody of their son, something that deeply angered Amber. As a result, she abandoned her child for over a year, showing no concern for Brandon's life. Therefore, when she suddenly reappeared and asked for another chance, both Brandon and his family were stunned. To better understand the situation, investigators shifted their focus to Amber, aware of her relationship with Justin. Amber initially claimed that Brandon had left on his motorcycle following an argument, but Brandon's family disputed this because the motorcycle had broken down. The question arose: if the motorcycle was not seriously damaged, why would Brandon transport it to Oklahoma instead of repairing it at home? As for Amber, she never mentioned that Brandon was working on the motorcycle. She also claimed she had gone to see a doctor after Brandon left to confront Justin. However, police found no records showing she visited any medical facility in the city that day. This meant Amber lacked an alibi. Investigators made a key discovery when they learned that Amber had asked a friend to babysit her son on the day Brandon died. The friend arrived around 3 p.m., at which time Amber and Brandon left together in Brandon's pickup truck, with the motorcycle still loaded in the back. Amber intentionally left her phone at home and did not return for 8 hours. When she finally came back, neither Brandon nor his motorcycle were in the truck. After accessing Amber's phone, investigators found a text message received shortly before she and Brandon left the house. The message, sent by Justin, read, "Ink is ready." Police believed this implied that everything was prepared to deal with Brandon. Officers interviewed Amber's close friends, who said she never intended to reconcile with her ex-husband and frequently spoke poorly of him. Amber resented Brandon for gaining custody of their son and viewed him as strict and inflexible. However, a forensic handwriting analysis confirmed that Amber had written a note found in Justin's safe listing materials needed to dispose of a body. When police reviewed surveillance footage from a local store, they discovered that the crime had been planned and organized in advance. The video, recorded the day before Brandon's death, showed Justin buying buckets and other items from the list Amber had written. While awaiting trial, Justin continued to claim that he acted alone and in self-defense. He insisted he was trying to protect Amber, who had not yet been arrested. Justin said that the items on Amber's list were meant for home repairs, not for disposing of a body. He also stated that he used 2 different weapons, claiming he held a shotgun in one hand and a pistol in the other, a statement police found highly suspicious. A trial expected to last several weeks concluded much sooner, as the jury deliberated for only about an hour and a half before reaching a verdict. They recommended a life without parole sentence. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Austin expressed satisfaction with the outcome, saying the verdict was appropriate and brought justice to the family of the victim, Brandon Duran. Cindy Ware, Brandon's mother, was relieved by the jury's decision after nearly 2 years of waiting. In October 2014, Justin Hammer was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 months later, Amber was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of her husband Brandon, desecration of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a crime. Amber pleaded not guilty and sought release on bail. She sat in the courtroom, handcuffed and wearing a prison jumpsuit, expressing her desire to be home with her son. Hoping to remain with her son until trial, Amber requested bail. However, District Judge Jeff Virgin, who traveled from Norman to oversee the jury trial, granted the prosecution's request to deny her bail. The trial began in the spring of 2017, more than 2 years after the crime. Amber Andrews pleaded not guilty, with her attorney arguing that she had not been present at the crime scene. However, prosecutors Christy Miller and Jennifer Austin argued that Amber had the sole motive to kill Brandon Duran. Prosecutor Christy contended that Amber orchestrated the crime by luring Brandon to her lover's home, where Justin shot him 3 times with a pistol. Amber then allegedly delivered the final shotgun blast. Christy emphasized to the jury that all witness testimony and evidence presented at trial directly implicated Amber in the murder. She stated that the only person who wanted him gone was Amber Andrews, the only person with a motive, and the only person who needed him out of the way was her. Amber needed Brandon not only dead, but gone without a trace. She had a clear motive, and her boyfriend Justin had a place where the crime could be carried out. They believed they had devised the perfect plan. According to Christy, Amber's motive was to eliminate Brandon so she could regain custody of their young son. Amber was gone for 8 hours on the day Brandon died, and there was no solid evidence supporting her alibi. Prosecutor Christy argued that Amber helped Justin dispose of the body and clean the house. She did not want to hand her son over to a man she despised, and since she could not win custody through the court system, she decided to remove Brandon permanently. Defense attorney Jay Mendros countered that the prosecution had failed to present any evidence directly connecting Amber to the murder. He stressed this point to the jury, saying the lack of evidence had caused prosecutors to unfairly attack Amber's character. He argued that Amber was not a cold-blooded killer and had not planned the murder. According to attorney Jay Mendez, Justin carried out the crime because he feared losing Amber, especially since Brandon had traveled to Oklahoma to reconcile with her, while Justin, who had been dating Amber for a year, felt threatened by the possibility of losing her to her ex-husband. The defense argued that Justin had a clear motive to kill Brandon because he was entangled in a complicated love triangle. The attorney claimed the prosecution had misinterpreted the testimony and actions of everyone involved. The defense insisted that a person cannot be convicted based on speculation and suspicion. In this case, the only concrete evidence was Justin Hammer's confession, in which he accepted full responsibility and claimed he acted alone. After listening to more than 4 hours of closing arguments at the Garvin County Courthouse, the jury delivered a guilty verdict. They recommended a life sentence for 35-year-old Amber Andrews. Sentencing was set for June 12, 2017. On the day of the trial, Amber Andrews appeared in a cheerful mood. Brandon's mother, Cindy Ware, tearfully took the stand to share how her son's death had impacted her and her grandson. Cindy addressed Amber directly, saying that Brandon's death had destroyed all her dreams. She emphasized that Brandon had only wanted to be with his family, and Amber's actions had taken that away from him. Cindy also said that Brandon would never get the chance to teach his son how to snowboard, something he had always wanted to do. She looked at Amber, nodding her head, and said it was the work of the devil. The judge sentenced Amber Andrews to life in prison without the possibility of parole for her role in the first-degree murder of Brandon Duran. She also received additional prison sentences: 7 years for desecrating Brandon's remains and 10 years for conspiracy to commit a felony. Amber Andrews is currently serving her sentence at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in Oklahoma, while her co-defendant, Justin Hammer, is serving his sentence at the Oklahoma State Prison. Brandon's son, Brando, was placed in the care of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services in August 2012 and is currently living with a foster family. In January 2013, after Brandon's family challenged the court system, Brando was allowed to return to San Diego to live with his grandmother. After 5 years of legal battles, Brando's grandmother Cindy finally won full custody of him. It was only after the trial that Cindy and her family felt it was time to tell Brando the truth about the court's decision and what had happened to his mother, Amber Andrews. Moving on to the next case. The case of Diana D. Aiello. Diana Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father served in the military, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Diana met Kevin Green under dramatic circumstances. She was being harassed by several men at a bar, and Kevin intervened, chasing the men away. Grateful for his assistance, Diana bought him a drink, and they went on a date a few days later. Their relationship quickly developed, despite Kevin being in the process of divorcing his first wife. Kevin and Diana eventually moved in together, and Diana became pregnant. After Kevin's divorce was finalized, they married. While awaiting the birth of their daughter, they rented an apartment in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Diana stayed home preparing for the baby, having previously worked alongside her mother in the garment factory. By late September 1979, Diana was nearly 9 months pregnant. On the evening of September 30th, Kevin and Diana had an argument after watching a movie together. The stress of the impending birth had strained their relationship. To calm himself and avoid further conflict, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby restaurant. About 40 minutes later, he called the local police to report that Diana had been shot and needed urgent medical attention. Police arrived quickly and found Diana lying on the bed, covered in blood, with a head wound that initially appeared to be a gunshot. However, paramedics later determined that the injury was caused by blunt force trauma. First responders provided aid until Diana could be transported to the hospital, at which point Kevin was asked to leave the room to give a statement. Kevin explained that he had left the apartment during their argument to calm down and buy burgers at a fast food restaurant. In his haste, he realized he had left his keys inside, but chose not to return for them. Instead, he locked the door and drove to his car. On the way, he noticed a truck with its back door open and an African-American man walking back and forth nearby. It was late, around 2 a.m. Kevin first went to a busy fast food location, but finding it crowded, drove a few miles to another branch. After purchasing his meal, he drove home for approximately 40 minutes. Upon arrival, he discovered the front door wide open and Diana covered in blood, prompting him to immediately call the police. Although aspects of Kevin's story seemed suspicious, the police verified the details. The fast food bag contained warm food, and the receipt confirmed the time and location of the purchase, supporting Kevin's account. He was allowed to go to the hospital, but was asked to provide a blood sample for the investigation. While DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts could still compare the blood at the scene with Kevin's blood type to assist in the inquiry. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors concluded that her head wound was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it was probably inflicted by a small, heavy object. Unfortunately, Diana fell into a coma. The medical team worked tirelessly for several hours to save both her and her unborn child. After many hours of intense care, they managed to stabilize Diana's condition, but she still required surgery. During the investigation, police asked medical experts to determine whether Diana had been sexually assaulted. The experts confirmed that Diana had indeed been sexually assaulted, discovering semen on her body. However, Kevin testified that he and Diana had had sex just hours before the argument. Diana and Kevin's family stayed in the hospital all night. The next morning, the baby's conditions suddenly worsened. Doctors tried, but the baby did not survive. Although Diana remained in a coma, her chances of survival had improved. However, doctors warned that she could suffer long-term effects. Although Kevin had an alibi, police were not quick to clear him due to several inconsistencies in his story. He had argued with Diana just hours before the attack, left his front door unlocked, and spent much of the time on a quick trip to a fast food restaurant. His claim of seeing a suspicious person near his home at night also raised doubts. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Kevin to the crime. Police are investigating another suspect in a series of similar crimes in the area. A year earlier, a series of break-ins and assaults had occurred in Tustin and surrounding areas with a similar modus operandi. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was killed after being beaten with a piece of wood and sexually assaulted. 4 months later, a 21-year-old woman was murdered and sexually assaulted. In July 1979, a woman was attacked in her apartment but survived, although she remained in a coma for several weeks. Her testimony provided no new leads. Prior to Diana's attack, a similar assault occurred in September 1979 when a 34-year-old woman was murdered. A series of crimes happened, all bearing striking similarities to the attack on Diana. Police believed they were dealing with a serial killer and focused their efforts on capturing him. To address growing concern, the police decided to issue a public warning through the media, specifically targeting women living alone and those residing in low-rise apartments, who appeared to be the serial killer's preferred targets. The warning caused panic, and in response, police increased night patrols in the area. They began by interviewing residents and soon received their first leads. Several victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their homes. Although the description was somewhat vague, police identified several men who matched and investigated them. Unfortunately, these leads did not result in any cases. A week after Diana was attacked, her doctors informed her loved ones that she had finally regained consciousness. However, there was serious concern that Diana was unable to speak or remember anything. According to her doctors, her brain was still in the process of recovering. Around the same time, another attack occurred in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, striking her multiple times with a piece of wood and sexually assaulting her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police were once again unable to apprehend the perpetrator. Diana spent several days in the hospital recovering from her injuries. During this time, her mind slowly cleared, but she had lost nearly all of her memory. Doctors informed her family that her memories might return, but warned them not to remind her of anything, allowing her to recall events on her own. After being stabilized, Diana was discharged from the hospital and her family took her home. Her husband, Kevin, had to work at the military base, so Diana was sent to live with her parents. 2 weeks later, another attack occurred in the city, similar to the one on Diana. This time, the attacker killed a 17-year-old girl. Diana began attending physical therapy sessions, and her condition gradually improved. Although she still could not speak or remember the attack, a breakthrough occurred 6 weeks later during a therapy session. The doctor asked Diana if she could remember who had attacked her. To the doctor's surprise, Diana suddenly pointed to her wedding ring. The doctor shared this information with Diana's mother when she came to pick her up. Diana's mother asked her daughter if her husband, Kevin, was the one who attacked her, and Diana nodded. Diana's mother immediately took her to the police station to speak with the chief. After asking Diana a few more questions, the police confirmed that she remembered her attacker and identified him as her husband, Kevin. This new information dramatically changed the course of the investigation. Police suspected that Diana's attack was related to a series of similar incidents in the area committed by a serial offender. However, Kevin matched the suspect's description, leading police to question whether Kevin could be the perpetrator behind these attacks. The police asked Diana and her mother to pretend that Diana had not recovered her memory and to return home with Kevin, and they agreed to do so. Meanwhile, the police kept a close watch on Kevin, monitoring his every move in the hope of finding evidence linking him to the serial murders. Crime scene testing revealed evidence under Diana's fingernails, where they found bloody skin particles in addition to the attacker's semen. After analyzing the evidence, police found a match between the attacker's blood type and Kevin's blood sample, indicating that Kevin was the one who attacked Diana. Regarding a motive, police suspected that Diana's refusal to have sex with Kevin may have prompted the attack. Although Kevin insisted that they had sex earlier that night, the police spoke to Diana, and she remembered the attack clearly, confirming that Kevin was her assailant. During the conversation, her mother expressed that they could no longer live with Kevin, and the police decided to arrest him. To protect Diana's family, Kevin was arrested at a store rather than at their home. Despite his arrest, Kevin continued to maintain his innocence. Preparations for the trial lasted 10 months, during which time Diana's health gradually improved. She regained her ability to speak. Diana was cleared of any charges, and her husband was found guilty of assaulting her. Kevin's defense team attempted to rely on his fast food alibi, but it was insufficient to disprove Diana's testimony. As a result, Kevin was convicted in November 1980 of the child's murder and assault on Diana. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Police discovered that 2 similar crimes had occurred in their district before Kevin's arrest, but both victims had survived. Although the identity of the attacker remained unknown, these incidents raised suspicions that Kevin may have been involved in other crimes. The attacks ceased abruptly after Kevin's arrest. Following Kevin's sentencing, Diana promptly filed for divorce, which Kevin did not contest. Diana then focused on her recovery. When Kevin became eligible for parole, the committee denied his request, a decision that was repeated 3 more times. The serial killer case remained unsolved until 1996, when police reopened the investigation. Semen samples from the victims, which had been stored in a laboratory, were retested. Police sought to determine the true culprit, and DNA analysis produced a surprising result. Gerald Parker, a man arrested the same year as Kevin, was found to have a DNA match to the serial murders. After the DNA match confirmed Parker's involvement in the serial murders, investigators re-examined the attack on Diana. Parker and Kevin had worked together on a military base, and Parker owned a dark-colored van similar to the one described in the attacks. During his initial police interview, Kevin reported seeing an African-American man near a dark-colored truck in front of their home on the day of the attack. This information led police to consider the possibility that Parker was involved in the assault on Diana. While Kevin remained in jail, the local prosecutor updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher serial murder investigation. The prosecutor requested that Kevin provide a DNA sample, which he quickly agreed to. While the DNA analysis was underway, police visited Parker in prison to discuss the case. Although they had not yet formally charged him with the attacks, they aimed to gather more information. Parker initially denied any involvement in the crimes, so detectives concentrated their questioning on the attack on Diana. During questioning, Parker revealed that on the night of the incident, he drove his truck to Kevin's house intending to circle the neighborhood, looking through ground-floor windows for a victim. However, this time he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and when Kevin left the house, Parker noticed the door was unlocked. He waited a few minutes before entering the apartment and attacking Diana. Parker admitted that he did not know Kevin's wife personally, as they worked in different areas of the military base. He also confessed to committing 6 murders and 3 non-fatal attacks. After Parker's confessions, DNA evidence confirmed his guilt and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor swiftly moved to overturn Kevin's sentence, and he was released from prison after 16 years. The case caused widespread outrage, not only because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison, but also because it took so long for police to identify the real killer. When Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in compensation, a relatively small amount. Years later, he received an additional $100 for each day he had spent in prison, totaling $620,000. Despite Kevin's exoneration, his wife Diana initially refused to believe he was innocent. She had previously claimed that Kevin was her sole attacker. However, after DNA evidence from her body matched Parker's, she revised her account. Diana reported that Kevin attacked her before leaving the apartment, and then Parker entered and attacked her as well. However, Parker stated that when he entered the house, Diana was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress. He also admitted to hitting her on the head. Diana's family proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that Kevin might have conspired with Parker to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker denied knowing Kevin, emphasizing that the military base was large and many people did not know each other personally. Kevin also denied any involvement with Parker, insisting that he would never harm Diana or their unborn daughter. He explained that he left the door open because he did not want to return for the keys after their argument and still blames himself for that decision. As for Parker, he was sentenced to death in 1999, but this sentence has yet to be carried out. After years of waiting on death row, California imposed a moratorium on executions. As a result, Parker remains incarcerated to this day. Moving on to the next case. Gabriela Elcano. Gabriela Elcano was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, Chile, to Federico Elcano and Carolina de los Ocampos. She was their only child and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and was very close to her, as was her grandfather Carlos, who cherished her deeply. Gabriela grew up in a middle-class family that valued education and provided her with a solid upbringing despite not being wealthy. When Gabriela was just 5 years old, her parents divorced, and she went to live with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained actively involved in her life. Gabriela was a kind, friendly, and open child who was somewhat shy and modest, but she made friends easily and got along well with her peers. She had a lovely appearance that earned her admiration and delight from everyone around her. Gabriela excelled in school and loved music, dancing, and drawing, and her parents encouraged her talents. She enjoyed spending time with her younger brothers at her father's house, which was nearby. Overall, her childhood was happy and carefree, surrounded by loving family members. At 15, Gabriela fell in love for the first time with Fabian, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. They began as a happy couple, walking hand in hand, eating ice cream, and stealing kisses. Fabian came from a good family, and his parents were well respected and wanted the best for him. However, Fabian himself was quiet and secretive, avoiding eye contact and preferring not to talk to others. This led many to assume he was shy, though it is likely he struggled with social anxiety. When Gabriela introduced Fabian to her father, he approved of her choice, seeing Fabian as calm, responsible, and rational. Her father had a serious conversation with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela and promising not to harm her or let others harm her. Fabian promised to do so. At first, their relationship was loving and calm, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this peace did not last. After a few months, Fabian's true nature emerged, and he became controlling and cruel. He attempted to dictate every aspect of Gabriela's life, became jealous, and decided who she could and could not spend time with. He monitored her phone, demanding immediate responses to his calls and messages, and would throw tantrums if she did not comply. For the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela downplayed Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, thinking they were temporary and that he would eventually return to being the kind and caring person she had fallen in love with. She tried to accommodate all his demands, hoping his behavior would improve. However, Fabian only became more aggressive and volatile over time. He began to emotionally wear Gabriela down, and his abuse eventually escalated beyond verbal aggression. He would physically intimidate her, slapping her, pulling her hair, and grabbing her hands. Although these actions often left no visible marks, friends began to notice bruises on Gabriela's wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. As Gabriela struggled to cope with the abuse, she became withdrawn and depressed. Her friends and family observed the change in her, seeing the tears in her eyes and the sadness that had replaced her former smile. She began distancing herself from others, avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from speaking to. Gabriela repeatedly tried to have conversations with her boyfriend Fabian, but these attempts were unsuccessful. She even broke up with him multiple times, only to be coerced back into the relationship by Fabian. This pattern of breakups, stalking, and threats continued for over a year. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. He was accused of abuse and assault and faced potential jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school, forced to complete his education through homeschooling. After this event, Gabriela finally decided to end the toxic relationship for good. Fabian, however, refused to accept it. He apologized, made empty promises to change, and begged her to take him back. When Gabriella rejected him, Fabian resorted to stalking, blackmail, and threats in an attempt to control her and maintain the relationship. He stalked Gabriella at her school and home, even attempting to break into her bedroom through a window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, making constant threats and tearful apologies in an effort to dominate her. Despite his harassment, Gabriella remained firm in her decision to end the relationship. Fabian would occasionally disappear for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had finally moved on. However, he would inevitably reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her alone. He followed her everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and creating disturbing scenes. As a result, Gabriella became terrified of being alone, always ensuring she was accompanied by friends or family. She would go to her mother's workplace after school, and they would return home together. When she needed to travel, she would ask her father or uncle to escort her. This ordeal continued for months, leaving Gabriella drained and exhausted, though she tried not to show it. A series of tragic events began in early 2018 when the Alcano family was devastated by a terrible crime. A burglar broke into Federico's home, where his second wife lived, and murdered her while the children were at school and Federico was at work. The perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior criminal record, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother stepped in to support Federico and his children during this difficult time. This tragedy temporarily shifted Gabriella's attention away from Fabian, who had mysteriously disappeared around the same period. Meanwhile, Gabriella was also busy preparing for entrance exams, driven by her ambition to attend one of Santiago's top universities and pursue a career in journalism or advertising. This tragedy was only the beginning of a series of devastating events for the Alcano family. By May 2018, Fabian, Gabriella's ex-boyfriend, began stalking her relentlessly. He would climb over her home's fence or appear at the supermarket or mall, making her feel unsafe wherever she went. Gabriella was terrified and sent screenshots of threatening messages from Fabian to someone, pleading for help. She admitted her fear for herself and her loved ones, but chose not to inform her family about the stalking and threats, worried about causing them distress. On June 10, 2018, the Alcano family gathered at Carlos' house to celebrate his 80th birthday. However, this joyful family occasion would ultimately become the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful, filled with laughter, music, and a large family meal. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and cousins, but appeared troubled and distant. Her uncle Rodrigo noticed her distress and asked if everything was all right. Gabriella merely smiled sadly, shrugged, and said she was nervous without explaining why. Her uncle chose not to press the issue, thinking she would open up when ready, but he would later deeply regret this decision. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. At around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, jumped over the fence of his ex-girlfriend Gabriella's house. He planned to sneak into her bedroom through the window and attack her. But just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on and the back door creaked open. Carolina, Gabriella's mother, had been awakened by the noise and went to check on the commotion. Fabian attacked her, pushing her back inside and stabbing her repeatedly. In total, he inflicted 36 stab wounds, mostly to her chest, neck, and head, leaving her no chance of survival. Carolina managed to scream briefly, which woke Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to investigate. As she descended, she saw Fabian covered in blood and enraged. He grabbed her and dragged her down. Gabriella desperately tried to call emergency services on her phone, but Fabian stopped her. He then stabbed her in the chest, piercing her heart, which proved to be fatal. Fabian moved Gabriella's body to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He attempted to erase his traces by wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom. Finally, he quietly left the house around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. After Carolina failed to show up for work for 2 days and did not answer her phone, her colleagues grew concerned. She had been a responsible person and would not disappear without reason. Her boss contacted Federico, her partner, to ask if he knew what was happening. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone went unanswered. He also tried calling his daughter Gabriela, but her phone was turned off. He then contacted his brother Rodrigo, who had not seen or spoken to either of them since Carlos' birthday party. Federico rushed to Carolina's house, which appeared empty, although the car was still in the garage. He walked around the property, knocking on doors and peeking through windows, but hesitated to enter, even though he had a spare key. Instead, he called the police and asked them to check the house. When the officers arrived, they questioned why Federico had not used his spare key to go inside. Federico admitted that he was afraid of what he might find. At 11 a.m., he finally opened the door and entered the house with the officers. That was when they discovered the bodies of Carolina and Gabriela on the kitchen floor. They had been dead for more than a day. Federico was overwhelmed with grief and desperately called for an ambulance, pleading with someone to save his loved ones. However, the officers had to calm him down, and his agitated behavior raised suspicions. As a result, he was taken outside to a police car for further questioning. When Federico tried to leave the vehicle and found the door locked, he demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was being treated as the prime suspect in a double murder investigation. Rodrigo soon arrived at the scene and was shocked to find that his brother was being held by the police. He was devastated by the news of his niece's death and could not understand why there was no ambulance or medical assistance being provided. Both Federico and Rodrigo were taken in for questioning, and their alibis were thoroughly examined. Fortunately, they were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, as it was established that they had been with their family at the time of the crime. Further investigation revealed that Gabriela had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend, with friends providing evidence in the form of threatening messages and voice recordings. Federico remembered the obsessed suitor his daughter had tried to break up with, but he never imagined that the seemingly harmless boy she had introduced to him was capable of such a horrific crime. The police investigation into Fabian Caesar revealed that he had disposed of the murder weapon and thrown away clothes with bloodstains. Despite this, his shoes still had tiny drops of blood on them, and the pattern on the soles matched prints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, 4 of Gabriela's classmates came forward to testify that they had heard Fabian threaten Gabriela, stating he would rather kill her than let her go. As the evidence and witness statements mounted, Fabian was forced to admit to the crime. However, he attempted to portray himself as a lovesick individual who had not intended to harm Gabriela, claiming he only wanted to talk to her. He stated that things got out of control, and he ended up attacking her mother, who unfortunately became an unintended witness. After completing the autopsies and necessary forensic tests, the authorities returned the victims' bodies to their families for burial. At the funeral, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects and offer condolences to the grieving relatives. Gabriela was buried in the white dress she had always wanted to wear, while Carolina's casket was closed due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired an experienced lawyer who built a strong defense, promising a reduced sentence during the preliminary hearings. The lawyer emphasized Fabian's young age and clean criminal record, arguing that the dispute with his classmate had been resolved out of court. However, the victim's family demanded that Fabian be charged with femicide. The prosecution rejected this charge, as under Chilean law, femicide only applies when the perpetrator and the victim are spouses or live together, which was not the case for the 2 teenagers. Fabian's lawyer claimed that he had acted impulsively and under distress, which could result in a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Alcano family, understandably, sought the harshest punishment for him. Following the initial court hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested that he be released pending trial, but the judge denied the request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriela's father was furious, having lost 3 women close to him to violent deaths. The lawyer attempted to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to entertain this defense. In response, Gabriela's father and uncle, together with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriela's law. This law would expand the definition of femicide to include cases in which the victims were in romantic relationships with their killers, even if they were not married or living together. The proposed bill faced opposition because it would mean that perpetrators already serving prison sentences for similar crimes could face new charges and lose eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alcano family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriella's law. In August 2019, Chile's government introduced amendments to its femicide legislation, over a year after the devastating murders. These amendments, known as Gabriella's Law, included 15 key changes that were later approved by Congress. Under this new law, femicide is defined as any violent act, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of her relationship with the perpetrator. The law also considers additional circumstances, such as the victim being a minor or having health issues, as aggravating factors. In April 2022, Fabian Caesar went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's Law, the defense had no grounds to challenge the charges. Fabian was subsequently convicted of femicide under aggravating circumstances, as one of the victims was a minor, and also of double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Moving on to the next case. The case of Isabella Rodriguez. Isabella Rodriguez was born in Colombia in 1975 and relocated to Florida with her family in the 1990s. They gained U.S. residency and eventually citizenship in 2002, when Isabella was 27 years old. She married William Hellman, but they divorced in 2015 after being together for a decade. Isabella later met Louis Bennett online, and they began a romantic relationship. In 2016, Isabella and Louis had a daughter named Amelia. 6 months afterward, they bought an apartment in Delray Beach, a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. They married the following month, in February 2017. At that time, Isabella worked as a real estate agent, and Louis owned a small solar panel company. On April 30th, 2017, Isabella flew to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to meet Louis, leaving their 9-month-old daughter with relatives. They intended to spend a week on the water, returning home to Florida aboard Louis's sailing catamaran. After stopping in the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they arrived in Cuba, where they stayed for a few days. On May 14th, the catamaran departed from Varadero, Cuba, bound for Florida. Isabella called her sister 3 hours later to say she would be home the next day. Around 1 a.m., Louis sent out a distress signal to the U.S. Coast Guard, reporting that his ship had collided with an unknown object and was sinking. He also reported that his wife, Isabella, was missing. A Coast Guard helicopter crew located Louis in a life raft around 4 a.m. and took him to Key West Island, the southernmost part of Florida. The catamaran was discovered floating upside down at dawn, but had not yet sunk. During an interview with investigators, Louis explained that he and Isabella took turns keeping watch. At the time of the accident, it was Isabella's turn, and Louis was asleep in his stateroom. He awoke to the sound of the collision and rushed on deck, but could not locate Isabella. He called out her name, but she did not respond. Louis suspected that the loose mast might have knocked her overboard. Louis also stated that the last time he saw Isabella, she was wearing a life jacket. When he was rescued, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer noticed that Louis's backpack was unusually heavy. Upon inspection, officers found 225 collectible coins in the backpack, but their origin was unclear. Isabella Hellman went missing on May 15th, prompting a 4-day search and rescue operation by the Coast Guard. As no signs of her were discovered, the operation was officially concluded on May 18th. Authorities grew suspicious when Louis Bennett, Isabella's husband, requested a letter from the Coast Guard stating that his wife was presumed dead just 24 hours after the search had ended. The Coast Guard denied the request, as it was beyond their jurisdiction to issue such a certificate. 6 days later, Louis announced on TV that he was traveling to Cuba to rent a boat and continue the search for his wife independently. However, just 3 days after making this statement, Louis claimed to have already returned from Cuba and met with Isabella's sister, stating he had checked hospitals but found no signs of her. Louis expressed his despair and resignation over the situation, stating he was struggling to accept that his wife might be gone. He described Isabella as his soul mate and someone he thought he would be with forever. The next day, Louis and the police attempted to retrieve his daughter from his wife's family, but they refused to hand her over. Louis ultimately gained custody of his daughter with the assistance of the police, despite the scandal surrounding him. During the dispute, Isabella's sister repeatedly accused Louis of being responsible for Isabella's death. Lewis's composed behavior and actions following his wife's disappearance raised suspicions among both Isabella's family and the police. Investigations revealed that Isabella and Lewis had frequent arguments after the birth of their child. Family, friends, and neighbors all confirmed this. Isabella had confided in loved ones that Lewis wanted to move to Australia, but she opposed leaving the United States. On May 30th, Lewis gave an interview in which he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. He stated that they had planned a happy life together, but now he was alone and their daughter would grow up without a mother. While investigating Isabella's disappearance, the police also examined the origin of valuable coins found among Lewis's belongings. It was discovered that Lewis had previously worked as a first mate on a yacht. The captain of that yacht had a collection of 617 rare coins valued at around $100,000, which had been discovered a year earlier. While the yacht was unoccupied and docked in the Caribbean, thieves broke in and stole the coins on board. Although the perpetrators were not caught at the time, the yacht's captain later identified the coins found on Lewis Bennett as part of the stolen loot, now that the FBI was investigating their origin. This new information prompted the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. Previously, 225 coins had been discovered among his belongings when he was rescued. On June 16, 2017, the search of his apartment uncovered an additional 162 gold coins hidden in a closet. Meanwhile, Lewis had relocated to England, where his parents lived, and had taken his daughter with him. However, due to financial difficulties, he returned to the United States and settled into an apartment valued at $125,000 while also receiving insurance payments for the lost catamaran. On August 28, 2017, Lewis Bennett was arrested in Florida and charged with stealing coins. He pleaded not guilty. A few days later, a federal judge set his bail at $250,000, which Lewis was unable to pay. As a result, he remained in custody while awaiting trial. Additionally, Lewis attempted to have his wife declared dead. Lewis benefited from Isabella's disappearance by gaining control of their shared property and bank accounts. However, the judge refused to declare Isabella dead twice, as the investigation into her disappearance was ongoing. In a separate case, Lewis pleaded guilty to stealing coins and transporting them to the United States in November 2017. Lewis's parents asked the judge to be lenient during sentencing, citing the fact that his daughter had already lost her mother. In February 2018, Lewis received a sentence of 7 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. On the same day, Lewis was charged with second-degree murder in Isabella's death. Authorities believed he deliberately caused the catamaran they were on to crash, which was allegedly a staged event to conceal the crime. The prosecutor's case was built on the assertion that Lewis wanted to inherit Isabella's wealth to pay off his debts and take their young daughter to live in Australia. Isabella had expressed fear of her husband in text messages a few months before her death, stating that she felt he no longer respected her. She also expressed fear about returning home. In a message sent months before her disappearance, Isabella wrote, "If you no longer like or love me, let's resolve this immediately. It's sad how you treated me the entire time." An inspection of the catamaran before it sank revealed that the portholes below the waterline had been left open. The damage to the dual holes appeared to originate from within the vessel, near the waterline. The waterline is the point where the surface of the water meets the hull of a floating vessel. An expert hired by the FBI analyzed photos and videos taken by the U.S. Coast Guard of the catamaran prior to its sinking. The expert concluded that Lewis's account of the events was not credible. The analysis suggested that the vessel did not sink due to accidental damage, but rather appeared to have been intentionally scuttled. A professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the UDOT's Coast Guard Academy testified in court that the Coast Guard found no evidence of a collision that could have caused the catamaran to sink. Divers inspecting the vessel were cautious due to the risk of collapse, and eventually, the catamaran sank to a depth exceeding 4,000 feet, preventing a detailed examination. 2 years after Isabella Hellman's disappearance, a judge officially declared her dead. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Scott Suskauer issued a series of orders stating that Isabella was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017. Despite the passage of time, Isabella's body has not been recovered and she has not contacted her family. Based on the available evidence, she is presumed deceased. The statement indicated that in January 2019, UDOT's District Judge Federico Moreno suspended Lewis's February sentencing hearing in Miami and rescheduled it for May 28, stating he would not act until Isabella's family could personally visit her daughter, Amelia, who turned 3 in July. In November 2019, Lewis pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the second-degree murder charge against him was dropped. Before the plea deal, he faced a potential life sentence for second-degree murder, but the new charges limited his maximum sentence to 8 years in prison. According to a document filed with the court, Lewis claimed he did not remember what he was doing when he discovered his wife was missing. He did not search for her on the catamaran or in the water, nor did he use flares to signal for help. Instead, Lewis packed his belongings onto a life raft and then intentionally damaged the catamaran to make it flood, allowing him to escape on the raft. Prosecutors stated that Lewis waited 45 minutes after realizing his wife was missing before calling for help. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office emphasized that Lewis was an experienced sailor with training in emergency procedures, having previously sailed from St. Martin to Australia. It is difficult to understand why he failed to apply his knowledge to respond appropriately to the emergency situation. The prosecutor stated that Lewis admitted to being negligent in handing over control of the catamaran to his inexperienced wife, Isabella, which resulted in her falling overboard and drowning. Despite being an experienced sailor with a Royal Yachting Association certification, Lewis failed to ensure that Isabella wore proper safety equipment. In contrast, Isabella had no formal sailing training or experience, and Lewis was aware of this. Lewis had received training in emergency procedures, including man-overboard protocols and night sailing safety, but Isabella had not. The prosecutor noted that only Lewis knows the full story of what transpired on the catamaran that night. Following Lewis's guilty plea, Isabella's family, through their lawyer, expressed their immense pain and asked Lewis to show remorse. They stated that while Lewis could never undo the harm caused by taking Isabella away, he continued to inflict additional pain by preventing them from contacting his and Isabella's daughter, Amelia. Isabella Hellman's family is grieving and missing her deeply. Although they had limited contact with Amelia through 3 FaceTime calls, they had not been able to see or hug her in a long time. They longed to be reunited with Amelia and provide her with love and care. As part of their family, they wished to be with her. They urged Lewis Bennett to do the right thing. Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, was sentenced to 8 years in prison on May 28, 2019, after pleading guilty to manslaughter in connection with her death. During his sentencing hearing, Bennett sincerely apologized to Isabella's family for causing them immense pain. He acknowledged that his actions had led to a devastating tragedy for which he felt genuine remorse. Lewis admitted to making poor decisions that worsened the situation. He expressed regret in federal court in Miami, where he waived his right to appeal as part of his plea agreement. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Lewis requested the opportunity for early release from prison so that he could continue caring for their daughter, Amelia. Lewis expressed a desire to raise his daughter, saying, "I want to raise her in a way that honors my late wife's wishes." However, the judge denied his request, sentencing him to 8 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. As a result, Amelia will remain with her paternal grandparents in England for the time being. Moving on to the next case. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamon Springs, Florida. She grew up in a cheerful household with an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father often traveled for work across several states, so he was not always at home. As a child, Jessica was active and happy. She enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a strong fondness for animals. On April 5, 1996, when she was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That morning, her father left the house to run errands while her mother stayed behind to clean and prepare for the trip. After school, Jessica returned home and asked her mother if she could go outside to play in the apartment complex. The area was considered fairly safe because it was far from the main road and had many trees surrounding it. Her mother agreed, but told Jessica to stay only in the yard. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., Jessica's father came home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised because her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he insisted that she was not there. The parents went outside and searched the yard, but did not find Jessica. Feeling worried, they decided to ask the neighbors, hoping someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor said he had noticed Jessica in the front yard, sitting on the couch and reading a book. But that information did not help them find Jessica. When night fell and their daughter was still missing, they decided to call the police. The police arrived within minutes and began searching and speaking with the neighbors. Despite their efforts, they were unable to locate Jessica, so they extended the search to the surrounding streets. A few hours later, the police station received an unexpected call. The caller's voice was muffled by loud noise, but the operator could still hear it. The caller stated that the police would find the missing girl near a water pump station a few miles from her home. The police rushed to the pump station to follow the caller's directions and came upon a heartbreaking sight. Lying near the station was the body of a girl, hidden in a black trash bag. Only a few meters from the road, the pump station was located under a bridge and could not be easily seen. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and handed her body over to the medical examiner. Meanwhile, investigators focused on finding the person who placed the 911 call and reported the information, believing the call came from the killer. But there was a challenge. The call had been made from a public phone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the police arrived, the perpetrator was gone. Detectives tried to recover fingerprints from the phone, but it was extremely difficult. A public phone could contain many fingerprints. Additionally, investigators realized that the criminal might have wiped the phone after placing the call or worn gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica had been killed elsewhere and that her body had been moved to the water pump station. Marks on the ground in front of the pump station indicated that the killer might have pulled Jessica's body from a car and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothes were undamaged except for one missing shoe. Police could not locate it in her pockets or anywhere in the surrounding area. The only clue discovered at the scene was tire tracks on the ground. Police could not be certain they belonged to the killer's vehicle, but they photographed them. Medical experts conducted an autopsy and concluded that Jessica died from strangulation based on the marks on her face and neck. It seemed that the killer had done it with his bare hands. A hamburger was also found in her stomach, eaten less than an hour before she died. Her mother stated that she had not given Jessica anything like that to eat that day, which led police to believe the food had been given to her by the killer. Experts also identified no signs of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive uncertain. Police initially suspected Jessica's parents because neither had a solid alibi for the time she went missing. Jessica's mother said she had been packing their belongings in the apartment while her father went shopping. However, both theoretically had the opportunity to commit the crime. Police were trying to understand how the killer had managed to remove Jessica from the complex's courtyard without anyone noticing or without her calling for help. This caused them to consider the possibility that the killer may have known the victim and that she had left with him willingly. Another factor supporting this assumption was the tone used by the killer during the 911 call. Although experts attempted to clear the recording, they still detected sadness and remorse in the caller's voice, as if he genuinely regretted what he had done. The killer's behavior when calling 911 revealed a great deal. It was possible that he did it for the thrill of playing with the police and influencing the investigation, or that he truly regretted his actions and wanted to relieve that guilt in some way. However, upon closer analysis, investigators leaned toward the second possibility, that the killer sincerely regretted his actions. Police examined Jessica's father's car and found a significant detail in the trunk. It was a roll of black garbage bags similar to the one in which the victim's body had been discovered. However, after analysis, experts determined that this bag did not match the bags found in the father's car. As a result, Jessica's father was cleared as a suspect, and investigators redirected their focus to other individuals. Forensic experts examined the victim's clothing and body for clues. They identified several important traces. A large amount of dog hair was found on the victim's body, which was unusual because Jessica's family did not own a dog. This suggested that the dog might belong to the killer. They also found human hair on the girl's body, belonging to an unidentified white male. However, it took several days for experts to extract the man's DNA profile. Two types of unusual fibers were also discovered on the victim's clothing. After analysis, experts determined that one type of fiber might have originated from a car seat cover and the other from the carpet. This further reinforced the theory that the victim had been killed somewhere else and transported to the water station by car. Experts tried to identify the dog breed from the hairs found on Jessica's clothing using an FBI database. This database contains microscopic images of hair from numerous dog breeds and has been effective in solving criminal cases. The process of determining the dog's breed involves comparing the hairs with samples in the database and eliminating each breed one at a time. They eventually concluded that the hair on the victim's clothing came from a Shar-Pei. This suggested that the killer might have owned such a dog, and that the hair had gotten onto Jessica's clothes either while she was in the killer's car or at their home. Investigators formed an initial theory that the killer could have enticed Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, then taken her to his home and killed her. Meanwhile, experts were also attempting to enhance the phone call recording. However, this was a difficult task. To address the issue, detectives sought assistance from NASA. NASA possesses advanced technology for enhancing recordings, originally created to improve audio captured in space. They agreed to assist and provided the police with a higher quality version of the recording. Experts then needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare with the call and determine a match. Because detectives suspected that the killer might have known Jessica, they decided to play the call recording for her mother. Jessica's mother listened to it and said the voice sounded familiar, but she could not recall who it belonged to. However, after listening a second time, Jessica's mother recognized the voice as that of a neighbor who lived in the same complex. She also informed detectives that the man frequently walked a Shar-Pei in the yard. Police quickly identified the man as James Crow, 35. During the initial investigation, investigators had already interviewed him along with other neighbors. He stated that he had seen Jessica in the yard while walking his dog. They spoke briefly, and then he left. Detectives examined his background and found that James had no criminal history. He lived with his wife, who worked as a nurse, and he was currently unemployed, spending much of his time walking around the neighborhood with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives understood that James's voice and the fact that he owned a dog of that breed were not sufficient reasons to arrest him. Therefore, they obtained a search warrant for his car. During the search, they uncovered two concerning clues. Beneath the front passenger seat, they found an empty Happy Meal bag, which raised suspicion because Jessica had eaten a hamburger. Experts also observed that his car had brand new tires, appearing barely used. Police learned that James had replaced the tires on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous set was not very old and could have lasted several more years. James claimed that he had left the old tires at a car repair shop, which seemed unusual because they were not old at all. The police went to the service center to verify his statement. When they arrived, only one of James's tires remained. They compared its tread pattern with the tracks found near the body. However, the results showed that the patterns did not match. Detectives were not completely certain that the tire marks on the ground had been made by the killer's vehicle, since it was possible that they belonged to a maintenance vehicle that regularly visited the area. Police then searched James's apartment and found a box containing rolls of trash bags that matched the bags used to wrap the victim's body. Although this was not direct evidence, detectives decided to investigate whether it was possible to determine if the bags from the scene and those from James's home had been produced by the same manufacturer. Identifying the bags was challenging because they lacked any distinctive markings and hundreds of manufacturers produced similar products. To solve this problem, detectives contacted Roberts, the person responsible for quality control at a trash bag manufacturing company. Roberts was able to identify the factory that produced the bags in James's apartment by examining the code printed on the cardboard box that held the rolls. The product had been manufactured at a facility in Virginia. Experts discovered that small amounts of iron or titanium were present in the bags depending on their color. Because the materials continuously change during production, the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium also changes daily. Detectives chose to examine the bags from James's apartment and those from the crime scene by measuring the ratio of elements in the plastic with high-intensity X-rays. This provided a highly precise measurement. Careful analysis showed that the ratio of iron to titanium in both bags was identical, indicating that they were produced on the same day and even within the same batch. The process of manufacturing garbage bags often leaves tiny bits of debris on the machinery, which is normal. However, when the plastic sheets are cut into bags, this debris creates small streaks that are visible to the naked eye. Each roll of bags contains a unique pattern formed by these streaks. The pattern on each bag was created by particles of debris traveling along the conveyor belt, which were eventually replaced by new particles. As a result, the same pattern would remain consistent across several hundred feet of material. This meant that the two bags were not only produced in the same batch, but also within a few hours of each other. When comparing the bags from the suspect's apartment with those from the crime scene, experts found that their streak patterns matched remarkably well. Additionally, after production, the bags were rolled into bundles by a machine, but the rolling process was often uneven. Without close inspection, these irregularities were barely visible, making the rolls appear smooth. When the edges of the bags were examined, there were small folds and wrinkles that formed a unique pattern similar to the streaks. Experts compared them and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched exactly with the pattern on the bags from the crime scene. This indicated that, with high probability, the bag found at the crime scene had come from James's apartment. Additionally, forensic analysts compared fibers discovered on Jessica's clothing with fibers from the carpet in James's apartment and the seat cover of his car. The results showed that both samples were a match. Furthermore, an audio specialist compared the recording of the 911 call with James's voice sample and determined that they matched. Although the experts had gathered a substantial amount of evidence, the detectives still faced the major issue that all of it was circumstantial. However, the police felt confident in James's involvement in Jessica's murder and decided to arrest him. Because James continued to deny any wrongdoing, the case proceeded to trial. The prosecution presented their theory of how the crime occurred. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the neighborhood children knew him well. They often played with Pumpkin, James's dog, and therefore trusted him. Jessica was no exception, and this trust may have led her to become a victim. The police explained what they believed happened on the day Jessica disappeared. At that time, James was walking his dog and saw her sitting alone on a bench. He approached her, began talking to her, and then invited her to McDonald's to buy her a hamburger. Jessica was familiar with James, so she agreed. According to the police, James saw Jessica alone on a bench while walking his dog that day and started a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's and promised to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After they ate at the restaurant, he may have brought her back to the apartment complex and invited her inside his home. He may have asked her to play with Pumpkin. The presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothing indicates that she was there on the day she died. According to the investigation, James may have planned to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the autopsy findings, the perpetrator not only strangled her with his bare hands, but also pressed his palms over her face. This may indicate that she attempted to scream, causing the perpetrator to panic and attack. After Jessica's death, James placed her body in a garbage bag and put it in his car to transport it to a disposal site without drawing suspicion. James drove several miles to a nearby water station where he left Jessica's body. He then returned home, possibly after stopping at a gas station to make a phone call. During the preliminary hearing, James' lawyers attempted to dismiss all existing evidence, arguing that there was no solid proof of their client's guilt. However, in capital cases, the standard of proof is much higher. In James' situation, he had a strong chance of avoiding the death penalty. Based on these circumstances, a plea deal was offered to James. Under this agreement, James would plead guilty to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the killing, James accepted the deal. Although he was not required to provide details of the crime, James stated that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family the prolonged ordeal of a trial. The prosecution believed James had shown remorse, as reflected in his 911 call. However, the purpose of this call is still uncertain. The only reasonable explanation is that James genuinely wanted to lessen his guilt for such a grave crime. Jessica's parents were dissatisfied with the deal because they wanted their daughter's killer to receive the death penalty. They were also upset that James refused to confess to the crime. What was even more disappointing was that James did not serve his full prison term due to poor health. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49, taking with him the secret of Jessica's murder. Moving on to the next case. The case of Legascrimen. India is the only country in the world where cultural and religious traditions have continued uninterrupted since ancient times, which is likely why it draws tourists from across the globe. But in our story, we will examine India as if it were a coin, showing a different image on each side. On April 20th, 2018, at dawn, two young men went fishing down a river toward a mangrove forest. They took a long boat ride downstream until they reached a secluded and quiet location. One of them jumped into the water to tie up the boat, but his attention was drawn by a sharp, acrid odor that was very near. They went ashore and followed the smell. Curiosity led them to a horrifying discovery. There was something that appeared to be a human body hanging from a tree branch, with a skull lying nearby. The men abandoned the boat and ran to the nearest village to report the dreadful find. A team of investigators, forensic experts, and police officers promptly arrived at the scene. The experts confirmed that the suspended body was indeed human. It was clear that it had been hanging for a long time and had already begun to decompose. The flesh on the arms and legs had torn away, and the skull was found nearby. Next to the body were packs of cigarettes, bottled drinking water, and a lighter, which probably belonged to the victim. An investigation was conducted at the scene that same morning. The evidence discovered was collected, and the remains were sent for examination. The modest remnants of clothing still identifiable on the victim revealed that Liga Scromine, a 33-year-old hiker, was the victim of a tragic accident. But who was Liga Scromine, and what had happened to her on the riverbank? Liga Scromine was born in Latvia in 1986. She grew up in a large, warm family with an older brother and a younger sister. The sisters were very close and shared all joys and hardships from childhood. Growing up, Liga moved to Ireland, but always maintained strong ties with her family. It was in Ireland that she met Andrew Jordan. It was not love at first sight, as the reserved Liga had difficulty communicating with new people. But after 5 years, Liga and Andrew became a married couple with great plans for the future. Although Liga worked in a hotel and lived modestly, she dreamed of opening her own yoga retreat center in Portugal. Andrew supported his beloved's vision, and together they saved money for 4 years to realize their dream. Yet fate had other plans. In early 2018, Liga was struggling with the effects of an aggravated skin condition that caused her physical and emotional discomfort. To help her sister recover from this ailment and restore her emotional well-being, her sister Ilza invited Liga on a trip. So in February 2018, Liga and Ilza traveled to Tiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, so that Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Kovalam is the premier Ayurvedic resort area in Kerala, India. The name Kovalam means grove of coconut palms in Hindi, and it is a small village offering everything needed for comfortable rest and comprehensive treatment. Ayurveda, the system of medical knowledge on which the treatment is based, originated more than 5,000 years ago. It relies on the universal laws of nature and the interconnectedness of all things. Ayurvedic programs aim to restore balance and harmony to the body. Among these programs, Panchakarma is considered the most effective for modern individuals visiting Kerala. Panchakarma works to reboot the body efficiently. Many people who undergo the Panchakarma course in Kerala repeat it annually, and not without reason, as regular Panchakarma can help shed excess weight while contributing to decades of healthier living. Since 1985, Ayurveda has been recognized by the World Health Organization as the most effective system of alternative medicine globally. However, it is important to note that while Ayurveda offers multiple benefits, it is an alternative approach rather than a guaranteed path to longevity. The 33-year-old Liga and her sister came to Kerala seeking spiritual enlightenment and hoping to overcome Liga's depression through the Ayurvedic programs. Their 6-week treatment schedule included yoga classes, meditation, therapeutic herbal drinks, and guidance on nutrition and massages. The sisters were treated together at an Ayurvedic clinic in Kovalam and had already completed several sessions of their course. On the morning of March 14th, Liga refused to attend yoga class with her sister, citing a headache. When Ilza returned to their room later, she discovered that Liga was not there. With the assistance of hotel staff, they learned that Liga had left the hotel around 11:30 a.m., wearing leggings and a yoga t-shirt, and had hired an auto rickshaw to go to Kovalam Beach for a walk. The beaches around Kovalam are popular among both domestic and international tourists, and are usually crowded. However, Liga could not be found. She wandered the beach late into the night, showing her sister's picture to passers-by, but no one reported having seen her. This was unusual, as Liga was a tall, fair-skinned woman who would have stood out on the beach. After an unsuccessful search, Ilza went to the local police station to report her sister missing. Unfortunately, the Indian police showed little concern for the disappearance of a foreign tourist. They complacently suggested that the girl might have wandered off or would return the next day. They were not swayed by the fact that Liga, according to her sister, had psychological vulnerabilities that could make her an easy target for criminals. Although the police registered a case, the investigation began with little urgency. In fact, it could be said that it hardly began at all. Liga had traveled extensively throughout Kerala, visiting Kollam, Vakala, and finally arriving in Kovalam. She considered herself an experienced traveler in India and had brought her sister along to share the country she loved so much. However, the trip took a tragic turn. After several days of inaction by the Indian police, her sister Ilza began searching for Liga on her own. She enlisted friends to help and also informed Liga's husband, Andrew Jordan, who immediately flew to India. The search gained momentum after Andrew and Ilza contacted the local press and launched an online campaign to locate Liga. Ilza also reached out via Twitter to India's foreign minister, Sushma Swaraj, writing, "Please help my sister, a Latvian citizen. She has been missing for 8 days. We are very worried." In desperation, Ilza offered a reward of 100,000 rupees for any information leading to Liga's whereabouts. Liga's friends, including Alexa, who traveled to India after hearing about her disappearance, put up posters in the Kovalam beach area, where Liga had last been seen. They distributed flyers and asked locals for help, and numerous residents became actively involved in the search. A key concern was that Liga suffered from depression and had difficulty interacting with strangers. On the day of her disappearance, she had taken an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. She had approximately 8,000 rupees with her, but no passport, preventing her from leaving the country. The local police, led by station head Kumar, initially had no leads. They repeatedly claimed that the tourist had either wandered off or eloped and would return on her own. However, persistent requests from Liga's sister and husband forced the authorities to conduct a search in the Kovalam beach area, where she had last been seen. At one point, police speculated she might have drowned after the body of an unidentified woman washed ashore in Kachal, Kanyakumari district. Liga's sister examined the body, but did not recognize it as her sibling. The drowning theory was never confirmed, and the search continued. Andrew was convinced that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs with the intent of selling her. He attempted to gather information from these gangs, but was exposed and warned that continued contact could force him to leave India. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no significant leads. Ilza continued to search daily, visiting Kovalam beach and observing the area. On one occasion, she noticed a boat and theorized that it might have been used to move someone off the beach unnoticed. On April 17, 2018, Andrew returned to India after a temporary break to continue the search. The couple faced an ongoing struggle to locate Liga Scromine, whose body remained missing. The search was further complicated by the fact that she was a foreign tourist. The Latvian Foreign Ministry confirmed that the embassy maintained constant contact with Liga's family and worked closely with Indian authorities. They also requested assistance from India's Ministry of External Affairs and involved the Honorary Consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction covered the region where Liga had disappeared. At the request of the Kerala state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force joined in the search for the missing Latvian citizen. The search operation included an An-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Yet even this extensive effort did not yield the desired result, and Liga remained missing. The search persisted, and by that time all local residents were aware of the missing tourist from Latvia. They offered support and sympathy to Andrew and Liga. On April 20, 2018, Liga's phone received the most long-awaited yet horrific call of her life. A body had been discovered in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew drove to the assigned location, where the police were waiting for them. During the boat crossing, Liga's heart pounded like never before. She felt as if, for that moment, she would have to traverse the path that Liga had taken to her demise. Upon arrival, horror engulfed her. Liga recognized her sister's clothes. She identified the shirt and leggings on the body, though the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained unclear how, with whom, and why this had happened. Liga had reached a place accessible only by passing through Panader from Samudra Beach. Two women confirmed witnessing Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But why would a girl, already alone and being treated for depression, take a boat to such a remote forested area? The body was transported to the Medical College Hospital, where it underwent an autopsy recorded on video. Police stated they could not confirm the body's identity until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head lying nearby. Police tentatively identified the deceased as the missing tourist, Liga Skrymane. Supporting the investigators' conclusion was the fact that Liga's relatives recognized the victim by her hair and clothes. One theory proposed by rescue services in India was poisoning. Poisonous pong-pong trees exist in the mangrove forest, and she could have accidentally or intentionally ingested their fruit and poisoned herself. Between 1989 and 1999, more than 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. However, this theory appeared nonsensical, as the person had been found hanging upside down, but the head was missing. Clearly, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would have been in an entirely different position, and the head would have remained intact. The Indian authorities' claims seemed utterly absurd. Considering Liga's complex psychological history, investigators also explored the possibility that she had voluntarily ended her own life. Liga feared that the police might present her sister's murder as a voluntary departure from life. Although a rope had been found at the scene, suggesting the hiker had hanged herself, Liga demanded a separate explanation for the missing head. "Don't tell me it's lost," Liga said sarcastically in yet another online appeal. Breathlessly, Liga and the anxious public awaited the forensic results. The findings were overwhelming. The report indicated areas of blood pooling in part of Liga Skrymane's brain, as well as bruising in the neck region. The autopsy revealed that the woman had been strangled by multiple people and was killed during an attempted violent attack. There were external injuries on the body, likely sustained during a struggle. However, the presence of violence could not be definitively confirmed, as the body was already in a state of decomposition. There were characteristic injuries to the cartilage in her throat, indicating that someone had forcibly squeezed it. The trauma was severe enough to be fatal, according to forensic experts. Blood clots in her brain confirmed strangulation. They also noted bruises on her neck and legs. In total, 9 wounds were recorded on Liga Skrymane's body. In light of this evidence, the police no longer considered the possibility of voluntary death. The autopsy concluded that Liga had been murdered after resisting or struggling. Ilse breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that the police would soon apprehend her sister's killers. However, complications remained. As part of the investigation, the police began looking into local drug dealers and card players. Additionally, during interviews with local residents, 2 women stated that they had seen Liga walking alone toward the location where her body was later found. The police admitted that they did not fully trust their statements. Meanwhile, Liga's relatives accused the Indian police of incompetence, claiming that if the girl had been searched for immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is believed to have been taken from a nearby beach and transported by boat before being strangled. A special team of investigators began searching for those responsible for the crime. Around 40 suspects were interviewed. Arrests were planned for a few days later, once law enforcement had gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that resulted in the arrest of 2 men, who were eventually accused of killing Liga Skrymane. Police revealed that Liga had been lured by the 2 men, who then abused her before dismembering her body. The alleged assailants, now in custody, are local dealers of illegal substances. The suspects fully confessed under torture. Both accused were pimps and also involved in drug dealing, according to the police. The autopsy revealed little evidence because Liga's body was badly decomposed. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in the Superior Court requesting a review of the felony murder case. He believed that more people were involved in the woman's murder. In the petition, he pointed out that both defendants later recanted their guilty pleas. According to Jordan, the men may have confessed because they were tortured, which, as it turns out, is a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied Andrew Jordan, the murdered woman's common-law husband, a review of the case due to a lack of direct evidence. The trial was postponed for 2 months, but Andrew was outraged by the authorities' attitude. He had previously accused the Kerala authorities and police of incompetence and of attempting to cover up Liga's murder to avoid frightening tourists. Both suspects requested and were granted a postponement by law. They have the right to delay the case once without providing any reason. The more they postponed, the more Andrew was convinced that the case was compromised. However, both suspects remained in custody. The investigation revealed that 32-year-old Umesh and 28-year-old Ajay offered Liga Scrimain weed, and after she was drugged, they used it to strangle and decapitate her. It is noted that the two men arrested for Liga's murder had previously committed similar crimes on multiple occasions. Both worked for a food delivery company in the Kerala capital and earned additional money as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Ajay have been charged with destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously served as a pleasure ground for Umesh. He used to bring men there. 13 criminal cases have been filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims testified against him. Liga Scrimain, along with both men, was seen in the area by several witnesses. Initially silent, the men confessed to everything after the body was found. The detainees admitted to police that they committed the murder during an attempted act of violence. They were apprehended, but had previously claimed they had only seen Liga Scrimain in Kovalam. The men pleaded guilty after repeated interrogations. On December 6, 2022, the court finally sentenced both men to life imprisonment. The court also ruled that the criminals must pay compensation of 65,000 rupees, each to Liga Scrimain's sister, Ilse. It should be noted that there has recently been a series of such crimes in the country. Young girls are regularly subjected to violence. The crime problem in India is severe. Due to the high number of sexual offenses against minors, the government has introduced the death penalty. It is also worth noting that if Liga's relatives, especially her sister, had not been persistent, and had they not involved the press by organizing a press conference and enlisting the support of an influential MP, it is unlikely that the local police would have conducted a serious investigation. Initially, a theory was proposed that Liga had allegedly died voluntarily. As it now turns out, this is not the first incident in the same area where her body was found. After recounting this story, I would like to once again warn all women who are careless about the dangers of traveling alone in India. Do not seek spiritual enlightenment in distant, dangerous, and uncharted regions. Take care of yourself. Moving on to the next case. The case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, a loving wife, an amazing mother, and a friend. She was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to ensure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they married, they had a son. Nicole was known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and subsequently became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal was to become a fitness trainer. She had recently started a new job, and no one anticipated that she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive, but was having difficulty breathing. The witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who provided further details about the incident. He stated that he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building toward the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple that she did not know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a co-worker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19th, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters requesting lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole handed each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she finished, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, Several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. By combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives reconstructed the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers participated in this intensive investigation, assisted by canine units. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team combed the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a laboratory for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings, but stated that they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are attempting to determine what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the assailant did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the attack might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions regarding his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They reported seeing this man, who had features similar to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the time the attack on Nicole occurred, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives, working with witnesses, drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to gather clues about the killer. The sketch produced several leads. A man reported that his son knew someone who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and appeared to have mental problems. When asked about McCall, he did not hesitate to claim that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been published in the newspaper and added irrelevant details. Consequently, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the suspect's sketch appeared in the newspaper, police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick resembled the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never committed anything similar to what happened to Nicole. Although he had prior run-ins with the law, he had never physically harmed anyone. Police interviewed Nick and found his behavior unsettling. When questioned about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. Police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence linked him to the crime. Phone records also showed that he was not near the scene at the time of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family endured a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he could not stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He stated that the hardest part was that there were so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them. Police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their fears soon became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city approximately 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to head home. The streets were nearly deserted. As she left the bar, she attempted to call a taxi, but realized her phone was dead. She then decided to walk closer to the stadium to make catching one easier. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. Crossing the street and turning around, she saw the man behind her was still following. She quickened her pace, but was suddenly struck in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she regained consciousness, she found herself face-to-face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She told him she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather explained that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, she realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker believed he had achieved his goal, he fled. Despite the brutal assault, Heather found the strength to stand and step into the street. A minute later, a car stopped, the driver called 911, and an ambulance arrived to rush her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At that moment, neither Heather nor the detective knew that the attacker had already been arrested at the police station. A park was located near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night observed a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were covered in blood. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to transport him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noted by police multiple times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since the age of 12, and his parents had no control over him. He had dropped out of high school during his freshman year and had been arrested for driving without a license the day before Heather's attack, but was released shortly afterward. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. He remained completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw Jamie's photo released by Eugene Police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland, and their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping he would admit to assaulting her as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer any questions. Police needed to find evidence to connect him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from Timber Creek Apartments with his parents. Consequently, police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They discovered a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a laboratory for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, showing no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation appeared to reach a dead end. While there was no evidence proving that Jamie killed Nicole, there was sufficient evidence linking him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and stated he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had separated from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Autzen Stadium. Heather reported that she still experiences nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth as a result of the attack. She had to find a new job, and the injuries she sustained, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery for recovery. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened," she said in Lane County District Court. "I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine." Heather Miller held hands with 2 family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the assault she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge described Jamie's lack of remorse as appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said his behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and that the judge's sentence was fully deserved. A courageous mother of 2, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the chance to harm another person. She did not want him to believe he had won or brought her down, so she maintained her composure from the start. Although the defense attempted to portray Jamie as a young man affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer requested a sentence of 8 years and 4 months, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for his actions. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak and refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Voigt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the severe sentence. "The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this," she said. As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I cannot. When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will be required to register as a sex offender for life. As for Heather, her family stated that she is looking forward to starting a new job and moving on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to exploit Jamie's ego to elicit a confession. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death, telling him that he would gain more respect in prison if other inmates knew he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind, but also the person who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he did not intend to kill her. He claimed he wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but did not mean to kill Nicole, only to hurt her. He explained that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and carry a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed her when she turned around. Jamie said he chose Nicole because he believed she would be an easy target. When asked if he would have tried to force Nicole to have sex, as he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." He stated that he did not follow through because Nicole screamed when he stabbed her, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jamie demonstrated to investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jamie pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jamie and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital concluded that Jamie had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of his guilt. During the reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole. As a result, in 2017, Jamie Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Jamie, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked if he had anything to say before formally sentencing him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jamie said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, stated that Jamie's family visited his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. However, that was not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jamie's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law had changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to determine whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jamie's attorneys could request a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who had not anticipated it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they would have to endure another emotional ordeal. Jamie remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. Moving on to the next case. The case of Mitzi Sanchez. Mitzi Sanchez was born on August 10, 1992, in Vallejo, California. She grew up in a large family with 2 brothers and a sister. As a child, Mitzi was cheerful and bright, enjoying time outdoors with friends and playing with her siblings. From a young age, she demonstrated independence, often walking to elementary school with her brother without adult supervision, as the school was nearby. On August 10, 2000, Mitzi's 8th birthday, she was excited about the celebration party her family had planned. However, when she asked her mother if she could skip school, the request was denied. Upset, Mitzi left her home with her brother at around 7:30 a.m. The plan was for her to wait for her brother after classes, and they would walk home together. But when her brother went outside the school, he could not find Mitzi. Assuming she had already left without him, he went home alone. However, when he arrived home, Midzi had disappeared without a trace. Midzi's older sister grew concerned when she realized Midzi was missing, particularly since her birthday party was supposed to take place that day. As her absence seemed unusual, the sister called their mother around 4 p.m. to report the situation. The mother immediately contacted Midzi's school and confirmed that Midzi had attended all her classes that day. However, when the mother reached out to family members and Midzi's friends, no one had seen her after school. Midzi's family became worried and began searching for her. Family, friends, and neighbors mounted a massive search effort. Some walked the streets, while others went door to door along the route from her home to school, asking locals if they had seen her. They also distributed flyers with information about Midzi. Despite their extensive efforts, they were unable to locate her, prompting Midzi's parents to call 911 for assistance. The police quickly joined the search, and local media began covering the case. News of Midzi's disappearance spread rapidly, not only through local outlets but across the state. Midzi's family gave several interviews to raise awareness of her disappearance. Her mother desperately pleaded for the safe return of her daughter. The police received a large amount of information, but none proved useful. 24 hours after Midzi went missing, the investigation gained new leads. A man contacted the police to report finding bloody rags at a landfill. Upon further examination, experts determined that the rags were actually bed sheets from a hotel in Vallejo. The evidence was sent to a laboratory for analysis, but it would take several days to obtain results. Investigators also visited the hotel, but were unable to confirm whether Midzi had been there. While awaiting the lab results, they thoroughly searched the landfill for additional clues, but found nothing. However, the following day, August 12th, the police received a call that changed the direction of the investigation. Around 11 a.m., a man called the police to report a disturbing incident. While driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara, he saw a little girl running toward his van, screaming that someone was chasing her. The girl quickly got into the van, and the driver saw a man running in her direction. A young girl had escaped from her kidnapper and sought help from a van driver. As soon as she got into the truck, the kidnapper quickly fled the scene. The girl, who identified herself as Midzi Sanchez, explained to the driver what had happened, and he immediately contacted the police. Officers quickly took Midzi to a hospital for a medical examination. They also arranged for her to speak with her mother over the phone, and soon her relatives arrived at the hospital, where they were reunited with Midzi. The van driver proved to be a crucial witness in the investigation. He was able to provide the police with the license plate number of the kidnapper's vehicle, which he had seen as it sped away. The truck driver happened to be on the road that day, which was fortunate. If he had not been there, the kidnapper might have caught up with Midzi. Police checked the license plate and discovered that the car belonged to 39-year-old Curtis Dean Anderson, a man with a criminal history. Anderson had previous convictions for theft and kidnapping and was also suspected of other offenses. Police took a statement from Midzi about the events. She recounted that on August 10th, she had been excited to finish school and go home to celebrate her birthday with her family. When her last class ended, she decided not to wait for her brother and walked home alone. As she walked, she noticed a car parked by the side of the road a few hundred yards away. Inside, a man was watching her through the rearview mirror. Midzi felt uneasy, but she was not overly concerned because it was daytime and she was walking on a familiar street. Additionally, because she was young, she did not fully recognize the potential danger posed by strangers. Midzi was approached by a man who got out of his car and asked for her help. He claimed to have injured his leg in an accident and needed assistance retrieving a roll of tape from under the car seat. Despite feeling uneasy, Midzi agreed to help, as her parents had taught her to assist others in need. However, as soon as she reached for the tape, the man's intentions became clear. He pushed her into the car, covered her mouth, and slammed the door shut. Midzi tried to scream, but it was too late. The man drove away, forcing Midzi to watch in horror as they passed her home, where her family was preparing to celebrate her birthday. The man eventually stopped in a deserted parking lot, gave Midzi new clothes, and forced her to change. He then discarded her old clothes in a nearby trash bin. He warned Midzi not to attempt an escape, claiming he had a gun and that no one had ever managed to get away from him. For the next several hours, Midzi was driven to an unknown location. She demanded to know why she had been kidnapped, but the man replied that he had experienced a similar situation as a child. When night fell, He stopped the car again and began covering the windows with rags to conceal their location. He then shackled Midzi's leg with a chain and padlock. The man produced a bottle of alcohol and insisted that Midzi drink some. Despite her initial reluctance, she eventually complied. He took photographs of her using a camera and then lay down in the car to sleep. Fearing that she would be at his mercy if she fell asleep, Midzi stayed awake and began devising an escape plan. Her opportunity arose when she spotted a police car driving past the parking lot. However, it was too far away, and she realized that even if she screamed, the officers would not be able to hear her. The next day, the perpetrator continued to drive Midzi around the city, forcing her to sit on the floor of the car and covering her with sheets to keep her out of view. At one point, he briefly stepped out of the vehicle, giving Midzi an opportunity to attempt an escape. She tried to free her leg from the chain, but quickly realized it was impossible. She also found a nail file and attempted to use it to unlock the padlock, but it was ineffective. When the perpetrator returned to the car and drove away, he made a disturbing claim. He had stopped by Midzi's parents' house. Under the pretense of being a good citizen, he asked for flyers to distribute around town, further manipulating the situation. Midzi was left feeling shocked and overwhelmed, knowing she had been so close to home, yet remained in captivity. Over the following hours, the perpetrator repeatedly stopped the car, getting in and out. Eventually, he drove to a remote area outside of town and parked, where he committed a sexual assault against Midzi, leaving her in a state of shock. Afterward, he fell asleep. The next morning, he resumed driving, making several stops to buy cigarettes and alcohol. When he returned to the car and leaned into the cabin, an object fell out of his pocket. He warned Midzi not to look, but she disobeyed. She glanced down and saw a large set of keys. Midzi quickly realized that one of the keys might open the lock on her chain. Although afraid of the perpetrator's potential reaction, Midzi was brave enough to act. She grabbed the keys, selected one that seemed to fit the lock best, and tried it. To her relief, the key worked. Midzi managed to free herself from the chain and moved toward the car door, the final barrier between her and freedom. To escape, she opened the window and tried to climb out. Her body was exhausted, and her legs had almost no strength left. Using the last of her energy, she pushed herself upward and finally jumped out of the car. As she moved around it, she saw her kidnapper, who instantly noticed her as well. He yelled for her to return, but Midzi had no intention of surrendering. She ran in the opposite direction, with the kidnapper pursuing her. As she fled, she attempted to get help from passing cars by waving her hands and screaming, but all the vehicles ignored her pleas and continued driving. Undeterred, Midzi kept running. In her desperate situation, every moment felt like an eternity. She was driven by the fear that if she stopped even briefly, she would be captured by the perpetrator, a fate she was determined to avoid. Finally, she spotted a van and ran toward it, jumping in front to stop the driver. The driver quickly halted, and Midzi climbed into the cabin, exhausted, dehydrated, and starving, but finally safe. At the hospital, she received the medical attention she required, and her family soon arrived to be reunited with her. Midzi's story quickly became top news in town. When she returned home, thousands of people gathered on her street, cheering and shouting birthday wishes she had missed while in captivity. Meanwhile, the police continued searching for her kidnapper, whose location remained unknown. During the investigation, officers showed Midzi's mother a photo of the suspect, and she recognized him. She had seen him twice before. Once prior to Midzi's abduction, when he had been standing on their street staring at their house, and again the day after Midzi's disappearance, when he came to their home requesting flyers. Police eventually arrested the suspect, Curtis. He confessed to Midzi that she was not his first victim, and that no one had ever managed to escape him before. Curtis's careful planning and execution suggested he had experience with similar crimes. Notably, Curtis had a prior conviction for kidnapping a woman in 1991, for which he served time until his release in November 1999. The trial began in April of the same year. Midzi bravely testified in a crowded courtroom, recounting every detail of Curtis's crimes against her. Even though Curtis was present, Midzi remained composed and completed her testimony. As a result, Curtis received a 251-year prison sentence. However, this marked the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation. Detectives regularly visited Curtis in jail, questioning him about potential involvement in other crimes. During one of these visits, They discovered that Curtis had confessed to a fellow inmate about kidnapping and murdering 8 additional girls. The inmate agreed to cooperate with the police, sharing Curtis's confession in detail. However, Curtis himself was reluctant to reveal all his secrets. Rather than denying the allegations, he attempted to negotiate privileges in exchange for information, speaking to detectives in riddles. As for Mitzi, she was constantly bullied and ridiculed by her classmates, who labeled her as the kidnapped girl. They even told her she should have died instead of being rescued. The ongoing bullying made her school years extremely difficult and hindered her recovery from the traumatic experience. Mitzi could no longer endure the immense pressure and eventually turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism, relying on it increasingly. She eventually lost hope of returning to a normal life. However, a car accident after a party with friends changed her life forever. Mitzi suffered serious injuries, including a broken neck and arm, and spent 2 weeks in a coma. Upon waking, she received news from her doctors that she was pregnant with a daughter. This news gave Mitzi the motivation to transform her life for the better. She decided to dedicate herself fully to her daughter and to helping other children who were victims of various crimes. Mitzi went on to found a non-profit organization that continues to assist those in need to this day. As for Curtis, he passed away in 2007 due to illness, just 6 years after being sentenced. Detectives expressed regret that they were unable to obtain full confessions from him regarding other cases in which he was suspected. Notably, Curtis's son followed a similar path and was also convicted of murder. Unfortunately, his life was cut short in prison in 2019. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.